Welcome to DC Statehood Today, the show that keeps you informed on the latest DC statehood issues. My name is Catalina Talero, and you can watch us online at dctv.org or dc51.us. You can also follow us on Twitter at DC51Today. H.R. 1291, the Washington, D.C. Admission Act in Congress, now has 140 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, the most co-sponsors ever to sign on to a statehood bill in Congress. The bill will also provide for the admission of the state of Washington, D.C. into the Union. Earlier this year, D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton introduced the bill in Congress. A Senate equivalent, Bill S. 1278, was introduced by Senator Thomas Carper and has 19 co-sponsors. Both bills seek to make the District of Columbia the 51st state in the Union. A four-person delegation from the District of Columbia participated in the 13th General Assembly of the United Nations and Peoples Organization, also known as UNPO, held at the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. A District of Columbia self-determination resolution was passed at the General Assembly calling for the United States Congress to establish the 51st state. D.C. also became an official signatory voting member at General Assembly. Members of the Scottish Parliament and of the European Parliament who were present got a better understanding of how these communities face double discrimination. U.S. Senator Paul Strauss gave a speech on the power of advocacy to foster political change, and Senator Michael D. Brown introduced the district resolution. The UNPO is an international, nonviolent, and democratic membership organization. Representative Franklin Garcia attended the 35th Annual Dominican Day Parade in New York, held on Sunday, August 13th, promoting the message of DC statehood. Vibrant colors of red, white, and blue were the highlight of the day, and more than 9,000 people marched with about 40 floats. Thousands of New Yorkers celebrated Dominican culture and music. The parade also honored fallen police officer Miosotis Familia, who was killed on July 5th in the Bronx. Recently, the DC license plate protest message appeared on a Jeopardy clue. The clue, a daily double, read as follows. This three-word motto is on DC license plates to promote its lack of voting rights. What is taxation without representation? Answered Joanna Kimmett, a librarian from Long Beach, California. This isn't the first time DC's lack of voting representation has worked its way into popular culture. Stand Up for Democracy, also known as Free DC, founded in 1997, entered a milestone of 20 years this year. The mission of Free DC has always been to obtain full democracy for all residents of the District of Columbia with equal rights under the U.S. Constitution. Events to mark the 20th anniversary of Free DC are scheduled throughout the year. DC Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton will star in the first episode of Washington City Podcast. The episodes will include topics such as jazz, local politics, and discrimination. And every episode should also help you better understand our city and local news. Recently, U.S. Senator Paul Strauss was at the 2017 Emmys, trying to recruit celebrities to promote DC statehood for its 51 Stars PSA campaign. The 51 Stars outreach campaign, featuring Hollywood celebrities, was an initiative that began in 2015 following a Voice of Impact event hosted by the Creative Coalition in February of 2014. And both Oliver and comedian Dave Chappelle gave shout-outs to DC public schools during the Emmys.
Washington, D.C. has everything an American city needs, except for democratic voting rights. I can't think of any other country in the world that denies voting rights to the people who live in its capital.
That's because there aren't any. D.C. residents serve in the military, pay federal taxes, and serve their country in so many ways, but we don't have voting representation in Congress.
That's why I support statehood for the District of Columbia.
Welcome to the DC Statehood Today show. My name is Franklin Garcia, and today we have with us in the studio Councilmember from Ward 7, Vincent Gray. Vincent Gray was also the 7th mayor of the District of Columbia and the chairman of our DC Council. Welcome to our show, Councilmember.
Thank you, Franklin. I'm delighted to be here, and I appreciate all your hard work over all these years and the leadership you provided.
Wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about the work you're doing in Ward 7. One of the things that I heard read was that you did a random inspection of one of the grocery stores in Ward 7, and you weren't very happy with the outcome. So tell us, we have in Ward 7 and 8 something like 3 grocery stores for over 150,000 residents. What are we doing to make sure that we have decent groceries east of the river in Ward 7 and 8?
Well, you're right. There's only 3 grocery stores for 150,000 people, which is a quarter of the population in the District of Columbia. We've been trying to do some creative things. I've got legislation that would reduce the property tax rates for retailers who come to Ward 7 and Ward 8. Would reduce for a period of time, as long as 10 years, the rate from the current commercial rate, which is $1.65 per $100 of assessed value, down to the residential rate, which is about half that. We also have a bill that would, if it's adopted, it would allow the district to be able to build the buildings in which these grocery stores would be located, which would be a tremendous economic savings for these retailers. They would be able to lease these buildings for $1 a year, and it would stay the same as long as they remain there for up to 15 years, which again is a tremendous economic benefit. It's clear that we've got to do something out of the ordinary to be able to attract retailers, grocers especially, to come to the east end of the city. We've worked very hard to try to get people to come in the conventional ways, and those conventional ways just aren't working.
Talk about East End. I heard you say it. Now, on the 19th of September, you tweeted that you wanted to rebrand Ward 7 and 8. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, frankly, when you say east of the river, which a lot of people have said over the years, unfortunately, I think a lot of people think other side of the tracks. That, I don't live on the other side of the tracks, and I don't want people to think that we live on the other side of the tracks. So, we have a West End, which is a very affluent area in the District of Columbia. So if we have a West End, which is positively thought about by so many people on the other side of the District of Columbia, then we should have an East End also. And what we have then is a situation where Ward 7 and Ward 8 would be in the aggregate looked at as the east end of the District of Columbia, and hopefully people will start to use it. And we actually already are getting people to start to use the term. We hope that they will think, in the same positive ways about Ward 7 and 8 when they say East End. They're talking about something very positive in the District of Columbia.
Well, great. Well, now let's shift a little bit to DC Statehood. And you've gotten arrested for DC Statehood, something that you're very passionate about, and we all know it. How do you see us progressing? Have you noticed that we're making any progress in the recent years?
Well, we made some progress, certainly attitudinally, but we're with the Trump administration at this stage. We're not going to make a lot of progress with them. He's not been a supporter of statehood ever, to my knowledge, and he certainly has not been at all supportive during the time that he's been in office since January 20th of 2017. We've got to be able to continue to be vigilant, continue to be passionate about believing that we deserve the same rights as anybody else in the United States. It's going to be an uphill climb with this current climate, with this administration, but we can't let that deter us. We've got to keep delivering the message to people that the 681,000 people who live in the District of Columbia are as entitled as anybody else. We have more people in the entire state of Wyoming. We have more people in the entire state of Vermont, and why should they have 2 senators and representatives and we don't? And it isn't going to happen unless we demonstrate to people ourselves. And I appreciate the work that you're doing on that, Franklin. It won't happen unless we continue to demonstrate to people that we deeply care. What did we start with? 13 states in this nation many, many years ago. And it took a fight. I guess Alaska and Hawaii were the last 2 states to become states. And it'll happen if we continue to be vigilant also, continue to fight the fight. And I think we are prepared to do that.
And so how do we engage more people, particularly people outside of the city, to take on statehood, or at a minimum to be supported?
I think we've got to get people, everybody in this city in one way or the other goes somewhere for meetings. We've got to get people to agendize this issue in whatever message they're trying to deliver when they go to Conference X or Convention Y, whatever the case may be. Everybody in this city should be challenged to say, I'm going to deliver a message about statehood for the District of Columbia. People get tired of hearing it. That's a good thing. Let them act. Let them say to the people who they work with every day that this is unjust, that the people in the District of Columbia have the same rights, should have the same rights as anybody else. And let it be said ad nauseum, to the point where people just say, okay, let's work hard now to get statehood for the people in the District of Columbia. In some respects, I think we've gone backwards. We have unfortunately bought into the rhetoric that, we're in a climate that is not conducive to our message, but we can't do that. We need to redouble our efforts now to be able to say to anybody that will listen to us that we are equal citizens. We deserve the same rights as anybody else. We have the same rights as constitutionally guaranteed, and we need to compel those rights.
Thank you for coming to be with us today.
I appreciate it very much, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Wonderful. My name is Franklin. This has been the segment of DC Statehood Today show, and my guest has been Councilmember from Ward 7, Vincent Gray. Welcome to the DC Statehood Today show. My name is Franklin Garcia, and today we have with us in the studio Silvia Martinez. Silvia is the president of the DC Latino Caucus, and we're very excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you're doing in the community and professionally.
Okay, well, I'm actually a professor at Howard University, and one of the issues that I'm dealing with professionally is access to education and health to minorities. So I'm a speech and language pathologist, so I do research on developing materials for people who need some help with stroke, Latinos, Spanish speakers, and even African Americans. So that's one of my hats that I carry as a professor and a researcher dealing with access to health and education of minorities.
So tell me, how did you get involved in I guess not only the community activities that you do, but also the political part? What brought you into that world?
Well, basically, I think it's something that I've done all my life. Ever since I'm like 14, I always had a feeling that I needed to help those that are most needed. So I was very much involved in union issues when I was in high school, and those type of activities, political activities related to Puerto Rico. I guess it's always been a commitment socially and politically to always serve those that need the most, and that's how I've gotten involved in many activities.
So let's now talk a little bit about DC Statehood. How are you and the Latino community being involved in this movement? A lot of people in DC care a lot about DC Statehood, and sometimes we don't see too many Latinos fighting for DC Statehood. How are you helping to advance that movement within the Latino community specifically?
We know that the members of our Latino community are very involved in dealing with a lot of issues, and let's be real. We have a lot of people that are hard workers, they're dealing with raising children, and sometimes issues such as statehood are not as deeply ingrained in them, especially if they come from other countries. Many people who come from other countries don't have haven't had that experience of access to do advocacy and to speak up for themselves. So we have to start working from the beginning, giving people a sense of empowerment that they can actually change things. They're dealing with changing their lives. And I think one of the big role that the DC Latino Caucus has is just to continue educating. We continually educate people about what it means for DC to become a state and how it would empower not only the state of Washington, D.C., but also eventually it'll trickle down to them and their feeling of empowerment.
Great. And so tell me some of the projects that you're doing at the DC Latino Caucus. I know that you were recently sworn in as the new president of the organization.
Yes, it's very, very exciting, and I'm very appreciative of being given that position. Right now, we are very interested in expanding the DC Latino Caucus. We really want to bring in more members. So we do have a plan, a strategy, where we... Our thing is that we want to be everywhere. And if we're everywhere, we're able to educate everybody. Not only about the issues pertaining to Latinos, but also things such as statehood. So we have a plan, and our plan is really to have our people, our members, really get involved in all areas of politics here. So we really want representation in all Democratic Party activities, all Democratic Party groups that we have. And so that's going to be a big start. We have started a speaker series, which thanks to you with the great idea. So that's part of educating the community and bringing them in so that not only do we educate them and they feel that we are a voice for them, and they also feel that they can come to us and say, listen, this is what's happening, and hopefully we'll be able to meet their needs.
And so in the time you've been in DC, have you noticed any significant difference in the engagement of Latinos in the political process, for example?
Well, you know, I think we go through trends, and there have been some times in which the community has been a little bit more active, and I guess based on economic needs, etc. And then it lags a little bit. But I'm feeling that right now is a really good moment for us. We have a lot of people wanting to participate, be engaged. People are thinking about running even for city council, and we have you also representing us. So I think it's a moment in which the Latino community sees themselves as having an important role in this community. Last night we had a wonderful activity with the Attorney General, Garcia, and what we realized was that the city really is addressing a lot of the needs of the Latinos, but that doesn't come without us, the Latinos, telling them what we need. And so that in itself is a reflection that things are changing for us.
Thank you very much for coming to the show today.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching this segment of the DC Statehood Today show. My guest has been Silvia Martinez, the president of the DC Latino Caucus. Welcome to the DC Statehood Today show. My name is Franklin Garcia, and today we have in our studio Bo Shuff, the executive director of DC Bo. Welcome to the studio, Bo.
Thanks very much for having me.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited that you're here. And so tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you came to DC, and how you ended up in the center of really statehood?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. I came to DC actually when I was born. I was born in Fairfax, just outside of DC. My family lived here for a brief amount of time, and then we left, as many families did, for other opportunities. We moved to Minnesota and then to California, and then I came back to go to GW in '91. and have sort of been in DC or near DC ever since, off and on, working on various campaigns for advocacy organizations, working in politics sort of in general since then. I came directly to DC Vote having worked as Mayor Bowser's campaign manager in the 2014 election. I learned a lot on that election, especially about the city that I had considered my hometown, but didn't know as much as I thought I knew about DC. And working on that campaign and getting to meet people in every neighborhood all across the city really reinstilled my love for DC, and the issues that matter to DC really became important to me. And one of those is statehood, because to me it really resonated because it combines really my background. I come from working in national politics and working on national legislative and advocacy issues, and then obviously working on the mayor's race, a deep appreciation for the city. And it was a great way to combine both of those pieces of what I've done in my career to be able to help move this issue forward, I hope.
Oh, great. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at DC Vote.
Sure. A lot of what we do at DC Vote is educating the public. We know that most of the folks, once we have conversations with them about statehood, tend to be statehood supporters. We know that the more conversations we can have, the more support we're going to build across the country. So the work that we do is to get out and talk with folks, not only here in the city, in the district, but across the country. And that's through digital means, through various social media. It's through in-person means, going to different conferences and speaking opportunities. It's through grassroots, running canvases, knocking on doors, and now working on some outreach projects where we're directly connecting DC residents to districts across the country.
So talk a little bit about, I know you have a strategy to get us statehood. Talk a little bit about that strategy.
We do. I mean, the strategy is really pretty straightforward. We have to talk to more people. We have to convince Americans, and it's an easy conversation to have once you are in front of them and have the opportunity to talk to them. But we need to talk to more Americans and talk to them about the fact that this is the single most glaring example of voter suppression in the world. We're the only nation's capital in the Western world that doesn't have representation in our democracy. And those stories that we start to tell to people across the country resonate. And so that's what we're doing. We're doing it a number of ways. We're going to launch soon a viral commercial, video commercial, whichever way you want to put it, that really lays the issue pretty clearly out for folks. We've launched a program called D435, which is our District 435 program. And that's to match somebody in the district with somebody in a district. So we take a resident of DC who has some sort of natural connection to another area of the country and get them to work with the folks that they know in that district to become volunteer ambassadors and lobbyists on our behalf to talk to their elected officials as constituents. That's the number one thing we found in having conversations with elected officials is they want to hear from the people that live in their district, which just makes sense, or that live in their state when they're a senator, to hear what they care about statehood. So that's what we're hoping to empower folks to do, is somebody who lives here in the district. I use my mom as an example all the time. She lives in the 3rd District of Minnesota. My mom is probably not the world's biggest statehood advocate. But I know that when I give her a call or send an email that says, can you talk to your congressperson about this, she'll do it. And she'll do it on our behalf. So we provide her with the tools and the toolkit and the letters to the editor, emails to Congress that she can send to her elected officials because she's a constituent. So those are sort of the bigger pieces that we're working on right now.
Wonderful. So why do you think it's taking us so long to move towards statehood? Why is it taking so long for the fight?
That's a really good question. I mean, you have to acknowledge the roots of discrimination that are present in the statehood movement. That being that the denial of statehood is really a piece of the civil rights movement and a piece of moving towards equality. It has deep-rooted history in racism and the roots in we're talking about it today in the national media, roots in slavery and roots in the conflicts that were the Civil War, and we have to acknowledge that part. And that's a hard thing for the country to overcome. I think it's also because DC, we have to do more work. We all have to do more work to talk to the rest of the country. I think we've been focused really well on building organization and power and strength and working really hard within the district to get people supportive of statehood and supportive of the notion of pushing for equality and building power. And now we need to take that outside of the district and both resuscitate and create some new programs that reach out to constituents across the country.
And how do we encourage more people, particularly young people in the city and beyond, to engage in DC statehood?
I think young people are really key to this effort for a number of reasons. Their networks transcend geography. I think that a lot of us of a certain age, our networks are more tightly related to where we work, where we live, where we go to school, where our kids went to school. It's a less transient and less connected model. I think the younger that you are, the more broadly your networks, again, transcend geography. That it is more likely for a younger person to know somebody who lives across the country that they may or may not have ever met in person, but still have a good relationship with. Those are going to be the key relationships that we're going to need to build on in order to move forward on statehood. And younger people are absolutely key to that. They're also, younger people are far more embracive of this concept of equality as it relates to all delineations. And that's the conversations that we're having about statehood, that this is really an equality fight. And that this is really about moving residents to a place of being equal to the rest of the country. Young people embrace that left and right and combine that with their ability to talk to people all over the country and all over the world. I think that they're a powerful force for change.
Thank you for coming to our show today, Bo.
Sure, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for watching this segment of the DC Statehood Today show. My guest has been Bo Shuff, the director of DC Vote.
Thank you for watching us. And remember, you can watch us online at dctv.org or dc51.us, or follow us at Twitter at DC51 Today. I'm Catalina Talero, and we hope to see you next time on the DC Statehood Today show. Thank you.